برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا مع ليلى الحسيني في بث حي ومباشر عبر wnzk راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan with Layla Al-Husseini. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues with your host, Layla Al-Husseini.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and wdmv 700 AM. Good morning, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. Welcome to another great show on Radio Baladi on US Arab Radio. Today we are discussing a very important topic, countering Islamophobia and fighting radicalization, two parallel struggles. Lately, two parallel evils have been growing steadily and have been negatively affecting Muslims in general and Muslim Americans in particular, namely radicalization and Islamophobia. What is the connection between these two evils? How can they be best understood in relation to each other? What are the most important causes and what are the best cures for them? What are some of the most important do's and don'ts in countering and fighting these evils? These are some of the most important issues we're going to be discussing today with my distinguished guest this morning, Dr. Houda Abadi. Dr. Houda Abadi is the Associate Director of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center. She joined the program at the Carter Center since 2014, and she has an MA in International Relations and Diplomacy with a concentration on Middle Eastern Studies and Conflict Resolution. She holds a PhD in Political Communication and Media Studies. She was the winner of the 2013-2014 Transcultural Conflict and Violence Presidential Fellowship, and she presented, lectured, and talked and wrote on issues related to gender, women's studies, countering Islamophobia, terrorism, propaganda, the Arab Spring, among many other issues. Welcome to our show, Dr. Houda Abadi.
Thank you. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. I would like to start by giving our listeners just a little idea about your journey. What got you to the position you are in now at the Carter Center? Just give us a little synopsis of your own journey and how did you get here?
Yes, so I came I'm originally from Morocco. I was born and raised in Morocco, and I came to the United States to study actually psychology, clinical psychology in 1999 in the Midwest. And 9/11 happened, and actually this really churned what I wanted to do. And I felt like there was a huge gap and misunderstanding between North Africa, Middle East politics and the United States, and I wanted to fill it in. So since then, I switched my major, and I started speaking in churches, in mosques. I realized there's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication, and a lot of times there's also a lot of ignorance and misinformation. And really, my journey from there started to, from an educational perspective, working more on these issues. And then after my master's, I worked with youth, and I saw also how misinformation, the lack of understanding each other, affected also youth in the United States. And so I was working in New York City with Muslim and Jewish youth, and in San Francisco as well. And that made me want to go back to a PhD in political communication to understand also the role of communication in global affairs, which brought me to the Carter Center.
Fantastic. When you started working at the Carter Center in 2014, you actually started working on issues related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, issues related to Syria, before working on issues related to radicalization and Islamophobia. Can you tell us a little bit about your work at that particular phase at the beginning, and then what got you shifted to the issues of countering Islamophobia and fighting radicalization?
Absolutely. Thank you for this question. So when I joined the Carter Center, as you mentioned, I was working on two particular issues. One was the Palestinian issue, and the second one was the Syrian conflict. And we were bringing Syrians across political, religious divides, really saying what could be the political solution? How can we end this war? So from the get-go. And one of the things that really kind of surprised me is the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room at that time was violent extremism. And a lot of the Syrians that we were working with, they were saying, basically, this is not a Syrian problem. This is an international problem. We have all of these foreign fighters coming from all over the globe to Syria. And so there needs to be more of an international solution to this serious issue. So I started mapping what is out there and what are other organizations doing. And I felt that there were a lot of challenges from the international level, such as there has been a lot of, most of the approach to counter Daesh and other violent extremist groups that were in Syria was more of an aggressive security approach, which was more military solutions. There was also treated that there was a conflation of Islam and terrorism. And unfortunately, this has caused more of misunderstanding, fear, and also, to be honest with you, a dehumanization of Muslims and Islam in the West. And the last one also was that there was also the programs that were out there in 2014, 2015 did not discuss very much, well, what is the long-term solution other than bombing a city? What can we do? And these people that were fighting in Syria, are there any programs of rehabilitation, reintegration? So this is really what started me thinking that we need more of an understanding of what is happening. And so the project that I developed looks at both of these issues and tries to understand why Daesh was able to appeal to youth from all over the world to join. Like I mentioned, I was pretty surprised that even, for example, in Tangier, which is my home city in Morocco, many of the youth joined to Syria, and there's no connection. There's no connection from to the Syria issue. And the other issue was that a lot of the religious and community leaders were doing a lot of great work, but unfortunately, many of their responses was very dense. There was a lack of understanding of how Daesh recruits because of the aggressive security approach that was implemented. They were very scared that even if they try to understand more of Daesh, that they will be suspects in the quote-unquote war on terror. So this project tries to look at these two things. On the one hand, Daesh, and saying that this is an issue and other violent extremist groups, but there's also another issue, which is white supremacy groups that we are seeing, and the understanding of the lack of understanding, rigorous understanding of the phenomena of violent extremism and how it's led to more Islamophobia. So to combat one, you need to combat the other. You cannot look at Daesh without looking at the rise of Islamophobia. And at the same time, you know, we need an approach that is much more community-based and much more inclusive.
So would it be fair to say that your work that started at the Carter Center in 2014 that focused at that time on the Israeli-Palestinian issue and also on the issue of Syria and Syrian refugees, that kind of triggered your interest in the other issues that you're dealing with now, which are specifically countering radicalization and countering Islamophobia in parallel?
Absolutely.
That was your intro or your leeway into these other topics.
Yes, absolutely.
And I want to also focus specifically on some of the dangers you mentioned about the security-based approach to countering, terrorism and radicalization, which has a lot of downsides. You mentioned some of them. You mentioned the dehumanization of Islam and Muslims and, a kind of equating or always associating Islam with the danger of terrorism, and also overlooking some of the community-based work or community-based approaches. I'm particularly interested in you elaborating a little bit more on the difference and the distinction between the security-based approach, which is pretty much, top-down, and the community-based approach you are now adopting, which is pretty much bottom-up.
Yes, thank you for the question. So the project that we developed is a very much of a community-led community approach to countering all forms of violent extremism. And I keep always saying and emphasizing that really violent extremism has no religion, race or ethnicity. It's beyond that. And so this project works with community leaders across political, religious divides. Women also are included because they are really the community gatekeepers. And many of the approaches to the security approach, you would find that the woman is always missing, or there's a lack of engagement with women. Mm-hmm. The other one that is very important is a lot of times what governments have done is that they have focused specifically on counter-narratives. Millions of dollars have been spent on counter-narratives, which has been very ineffective. We need to move beyond counter-narratives to really counter-offers. Why are these youth going and joining violent extremist groups? Some of them are marginalized. They have a lack of belonging. There are real grievances, social, economic, political grievances. And unless the root causes are addressed, violent extremism will continue to flourish. So what this project does is bringing religious and community leaders from the countries that we've been working with is Morocco, Tunisia, France, and Belgium, and also we're adding United States and Libya, and bringing these religious and community leaders from across political, religious divide, where we have making sure that women are present, and really look at what are the challenges, but also the strengths of the local context so they can respond to these particular issues. And that we need to move beyond counter-narratives, because in this work, trust is the most important currency. And a lot of times the messenger is more important than the message itself. And what I mean here is community leaders are trusted and have moral authority are able to influence youth. So this project is very much bottom up. It's very grassroots, and it's really giving them the tools that they need to be able to develop themselves and respond to the local context that they are facing, with an emphasis of, intra-Muslim dialogue, rehabilitation and reintegration that these communities are going to be facing, and other issues that we come across.
Mm-hmm. This is a very comprehensive and impressive approach, I must say. We have like a couple of minutes before we go to our commercial break, so I just want to come back after the commercial break to a lot of the issues that you mentioned in more depth and details. But for now, I'm just curious to know, on what basis were these particular countries selected? Like a couple of minutes here before the break, what were the criteria or the reasons for the selection of these particular countries as targets for this project?
The selection of the countries really were based on the numbers of foreign fighters from those particular countries, communities going into Syria. And so we had Tunis was one of the countries that had a lot of Tunisians join Daesh and other violent extremist groups, Moroccans as well. And then we wanted to link also the diaspora with the North Africans. And I think that was very rich because it's all about the relational networks. And now you can see that in the project, we've engaged with 23 religious leaders across these countries, and they have developed themselves and implemented projects, more than 59 local projects. So you can see that when we seriously engage with local communities, we can see progress and we can also see success.
What about Belgium and France?
Belgium and France, we were linking the Tunisian and the Tunis and Moroccans to the diaspora. There's a lot of immigrant communities in France and in Belgium, but we also know that there have been a lot of French and Belgians who have left to Syria as well.
Very interesting. We will come back again to revisit all of these important issues and talk more in depth and details about them right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
The Rama Relief Foundation provides humanitarian aid into areas inside of war-torn Syria, as well as aid to the refugees who have fled to the neighboring countries in the Middle East. The foundation offers food baskets, container shipment, mental health, education, soup kitchens, and more. Go to ramarelief.org or call 248-990-4247. Any donation amount made to Rama will go to sustaining many lives. Call now 248-990-4247.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Dana, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
Are you ready to go back to get that degree you've always wanted? Is there a young person in your life looking for the right college? Are you ready to transfer to a 4-year institution? Well, take a look at today's Marygrove College, a tradition of academic excellence right here, right now in the city of Detroit. Classes start September 5th. There's still time to apply for fall and get scholarships. Don't pass up this opportunity. marygrove.edu. Ahlan bikum fi Marygrove College.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the 3rd Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we're talking today about a very important topic, countering Islamophobia and fighting radicalization, 2 parallel evils and 2 parallel struggles. And with me this morning is Dr. Houda Abadi, the Associate Director of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center, to discuss this very important topic. Houda, before we move forward with the discussion and talking about some of the most important issues you raised before the break, I just want to give the listeners a brief idea about the Carter Center itself. Like, what kind of activities, mission, vision does it have?
Basically to wage peace and build hope and fighting disease. So we have many programs that I'm from Conflict Resolution Program, where we try to support countries that are going through various forms of conflict, such as Israel, Palestine, in Syria. We're engaged in Syria. We're engaged in Liberia. We also have democracy programs. We observe elections. We have human rights program, as well as the right of access to information. And so we work in various parts of the world for these three various things. And at the same time, we have a major health department which fights rare diseases, such as guinea worm.
Mm-hmm. So there's a very comprehensive approach here, really, to peace and to security, and at the same time to, monitoring elections. I know that President Carter has been involved in monitoring elections in different countries, in addition to development issues and peace issues in general.
Correct, yes.
Right. Let me get back again to the point about the fight against radicalization and also against Islamophobia. In the fight against radicalization, words always matter. And I know personally that one of the, the struggles you had was with the term Islamic State, because as you mentioned, what happens is oftentimes when you actually look at the narrow angle of terrorism and you define the Muslim world, the 1.6 billion Muslims with this very narrow angle, you dehumanize people. And the word Islamic State itself associates terrorism and extremism with Islam. So I know that you struggle to have it called Daesh in your own countering radicalization program. Can you tell us a little bit about this whole issue of naming and which name and which title you choose and why it matters so much, and what did you do in order to try to get this shifted or changed?
Yes, like you mentioned, words matter, and they matter big time. One of the things of Daesh that it has been successful in is it's in its own propaganda. It's no mistake that Daesh has been thinking about what they should name themselves and how they started reformulating their title, because they want to bring legitimacy that A, that they are a state, and B, that they are Islamic. And in a lot of their propaganda that we have analyzed, they actually use U.S. political leaders and other forms of institutions that have used the name Islamic State, and they say, look, even them, they are recognizing that we are a state and we are Islamic. So for me, this was very important to move away from it and to say, the acronym of Daesh in Arabic has a negative connotation. And it's important for us to not fall into this trap and to really reclaim our narratives. I mean, one of the most important things is to reclaim the narratives. So if we go by with the same title that they gave themselves, we are giving them legitimacy without noticing it, without realizing it. So that's one of the major things. So people at the beginning, when I first started using the word Daesh, they had questions, but, they call themselves, Islamic State. Why shouldn't you just call it Islamic State? So until we understand that propaganda and how propaganda works in violent extremism, in radicalization, and we really need to be able to reclaim our words. This is very important for us also as a Muslim community, and to basically say redefine it. One of the major issues is perceptions that a lot of people have on Islam or on Muslims or on Arabs. And so we have to kind of always try to find creative ways of reclaiming our narratives, redefining our terms, and not fall into that trap and say it's okay.
This reminds me, Houda, of something else, which is really the term, the term Islamic radicalization or Islamic violent extremism.
Which I don't use
the terms that President Obama denounced and said we should not use the terms Islamic radicalization or Islamic violent extremism because, as you said earlier, and I agree with you 100%, radicalization, extremism, and terrorism have no religion to start with. But unfortunately, I've heard some Muslims use the same terms. It's as if they internalized this kind of line of thought, and they started to use the same terminology, unfortunately. So it's very important to be aware of the words, and as we said, words matter, so it's very important to avoid using these terms altogether.
Absolutely, and I just want to add one little quick thing for our listeners, is that there is many of the people who have left to Daesh from the West had very little knowledge of Islam. Mm-hmm. So, so that's very important for us. And the second thing that is really important is the number one threat in the United States is not Daesh. It's actually white supremacy groups that we don't talk about. And I think this also, it needs to push us more to put this in the public sphere that, not only Daesh, yes, it is important, but we also need to raise awareness that the rise of white supremacy groups in the United States are a serious issue and concern. We saw what happened in Charlottesville, but but we can see, according to the FBI, the number one threat is of white supremacy groups and not groups that are associated to Al-Qaeda or Daesh.
Not only that, but also even the surveys, the Gallup surveys and so on, show that 96% of the terrorist attacks done on U.S. soil have been committed by groups, like you said, white supremacists and other groups that have absolutely nothing to do with Daesh or any other group that falsely associates itself with Islam. Yet the media, and we'll come to the media in a moment, kind of exaggerates any of these attacks and makes it seem as if the 1.6 billion Muslims are somehow, complacent in this kind of tragedies and terrorism, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
But Houda, if you can just give our listeners an idea about this connection that we're talking about here this morning between radicalization and Islamophobia. There's definitely some kind of link here, some kind of connection that I would like you to please help our listeners to better understand.
Yeah. So I want to say, and I want to clarify, that Islamophobia existed way long ago. Some trace it back all the way to the Crusades, some to the 1800s with the imperialism and with colonialism and with conquest. Right? And you can look at Hollywood movies and you can say, according to one of a communication scholar, Dr. Shaheen, who said and mentioned when he surveyed Hollywood movies from the 1960s, way before this, where it said, any time that a Muslim or an Arab is portrayed in the U.S. Hollywood movies, they're portrayed as either the belly dancer, the bomber, or the billionaire. So the perceptions of Muslims and Arabs, negative perceptions, existed way long before, and Islamophobia is a form of racism that I argue. However, what we have seen, though, is that with the fight of radicalization, with Daesh being so mediatized, that's all we see. We don't see, the double standards of media in terms of coverage of terrorism. Most of the time, the word terrorism is applied specifically to the Muslim brown man or woman. So because of that, you can see that the fear and the dehumanization of the other has gone up, even though like the research has shown that most of the research has shown that there is a close link. Hate speech and anti-Muslim attacks correlate more closely with electoral politics than with terrorist events. It is still that the way that terrorism has been covered in the media is pushing more Islamophobic hate mongering. And anytime you would ask, a lot of polls have been, a lot of the Zughbi polls, the perceptions that many Americans have on Muslims and Islam, they associate it with terrorism. So there's a serious conflation of terrorism and Islam, which is very unfortunate, but it's also very, very dangerous. So what does this mean? This means that the Muslims are caught between these two extremes. So on the one hand, we have groups such as Daesh, which have hijacked Islam, and they put a bad name to the religion. And then on the other, we have bigoted groups, the Islamophobes, who feed directly into Daesh's recruitment rhetoric. And so we have these two things where we are caught in between, and we need to fight them simultaneously.
Which is probably why the Carter Center, and the conflict resolution program now is really kind of tilting or focusing on the connection. And, under your leadership here in these initiatives, you're really looking at the connection or connectivity between these two issues that some people may not understand why they are connected in the first place. Yeah, this is a very important point. Now, the role of the media, that's a very important topic that we'll come to after the commercial break. But very briefly, you said something about the counter-narrative and why the counter-narrative approach alone does not work. Can you, in a couple of minutes, shed light on what you really meant by this particular phrase, Houda?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of times, many of the governments have put millions of dollars in producing counter-narratives to say that basically Daesh is bad, or that, you should not join Daesh, or you should not join violent extremist groups. Well, it might have, I want to say two things why it could be problematic, and it is. One is, you don't need a government, like a U.S. government, to say what Islam is. They don't have the moral legitimacy. This should come from community and religious leaders. What government should be doing is they should be addressing the root causes of why groups feel, why youth are dreaming of dying instead of dreaming of living. This is something very important. So what we need to do is we need to focus on counter offers. What can we offer to the youth where they feel that they are part of this community, that they belong? Is the social contract binding? The problem is when we focus only on counter narratives, we are not addressing the root causes.
So you're really looking like superficial. It's superficial, and it does not really address the root causes of why these young people are interested in joining in the first place.
Absolutely. So counter narratives are important when done properly and when there are credible voices. And trust is the most important currency. And as I mentioned, the messenger is more important than the message itself. So we need to ensure that if we are having counter-narratives, Daesh's media's battlefield is even more important sometimes than the actual battlefield on the ground. So we need to also, engage with the media. But however, we need to make it in a comprehensive perspective, and every party has its own role. And the government's main role is to basically respond to the root causes in the first place.
I cannot agree more. We'll come back to this important discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Dana, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
The Rama Relief Foundation provides humanitarian aid into areas inside of war-torn Syria, as well as aid to the refugees who have fled to the neighboring countries in the Middle East. The foundation offers food baskets, container shipment, mental health, education, soup kitchens, and more. Go to ramarelief.org or call 248-990-4247. Any donation amount made to Rama will go to sustaining many lives. Call now 248-990-4247.
Restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Naji Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Naji Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Naji Abood, 734-744-9796.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, and we're talking today about the important topic of countering Islamophobia and fighting radicalization, two parallel struggles. And with me this morning discussing this important topic is Dr. Houda Abadi, the Associate Director of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center. Houda, before going to the commercial break, we're talking about the media. And being a media expert and communication scholar myself, I cannot help but talk a little bit more about the media and its importance, because I think that the mainstream media has also played a very important role, unfortunately, in really exaggerating, the whole issue of radicalization and stigmatizing the Muslim and the Arab community with this kind of stigma of radicalization and terrorism. And it adopted this principle of when it bleeds, it leads. In other words, when you have conflict and violence, the cameras are always rolling. But I believe we should have something which is called the alternative media, an alternative approach, like showing other examples and showing other models. What are some of your thoughts around this whole issue?
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. The way the media has done two things. One is the double standard of media. If it's a white person, it's most probably he's mentally sick and he's not a terrorist. If he is a brown Muslim, he's definitely a terrorist. So the double standard of media in terms of covering terrorism, what is and what is not terrorism, has been very, very problematic. That's number one. Number two, though, is that the way the media, the mainstream media, has also covered Daesh has been very problematic. It has given it Daesh. For Daesh, the media field is as important as the battlefield. We have to remember that. For Daesh, propaganda is so important. This is one of the things, one of the strengths of Daesh in comparison to Al-Qaeda. It has increased its propaganda machine and always tries to control the narrative and creating media events. Mm-hmm. So Daesh, that's what it's trying. It's trying to have it being covered and creating terror and terrorizing people all over the world. And it's exactly creating the divides. It's us versus them. This is what Daesh wants. And the media has fallen into this trap because it has done exactly that. It has given the space to cover these issues. It doesn't showcase community leaders who are being, who have been stigmatized, who are fighting, terrorism, and who have done a lot of work. So we have to be very careful. And in my work, personal work at the Carter Center with religious and community leaders, we actually have workshops on how can they engage alternative media, citizen media. How can they reclaim their narratives? How can we ensure that their voices are not drowned in the social online space? And ensuring that the people around them understand that this is they define what their faith is, and that they showcase their narratives, their personal narratives. And I think this is absolutely important in right now in our times to be able to do this, to engage alternative media, citizen journalism, creating videos that could be viral, Twitter, Facebook, but also at the same time finding ways to engage also with mainstream media and to bring this, to break this. Because what is concerning for me is the perceptions of the public on Islam and on Muslims and on Arabs is very negative.
And you have this spiral, right? The connection that we talked about earlier between, radicalization and the way the media covers radicalization. It feeds into Islamophobia, and it keeps going on in a vicious, cycle, so to speak, in a spiral. Correct? I mean, they keep feeding into each other, unfortunately.
Absolutely, and I wanted to cite something to showcase how serious this issue is. According to 2016 Zughbi polls, 60% of Republicans and 30% of Democrats find that profiling Arabs and Muslim Americans as justifiable by law enforcement agencies. And 46% of poll respondents felt that American Muslims would be influenced by their religion in performing government functions. This is really serious. And so this is the reason why we really need to shift this paradigm and try through, online networks, through offline networks, and reclaim our narratives from both the two extremes, from the Islamophobes and from groups such as Daesh.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you don't speak in your own voice, somebody else is going to speak for you, and he is not going to tell your story in the correct way. So we need to speak in our own voice and to tell our own stories ourselves, which is why the alternative media telling alternative narratives is a very, very important angle, which I hope the Carter Center will continue to work on, and the conflict resolution program under your leadership will also continue to work on in future years. Something else which is very important is the role of women. You mentioned briefly that women were seen as an important and integral part of the programs that are currently going on to fight both radicalization and Islamophobia. Can you speak a little bit more about how we can enable and empower women to be part of these initiatives and why that is particularly important?
Absolutely. So I'm very passionate about this issue because there are these two things where women are excluded. One is security issues, so anything to deal with terrorism, with violent extremism, with preventing violent extremism. Most of the time you would have a panel, and most of the panel are males. Mm-hmm. So women have been excluded from religious issues or from religion, and then to being like the leaders, and from security issues as well. And so women need to play more of an active role. But honestly, it's on us, the organizations, institutions, to ensure that we are providing space to engage with these women who are really the community gatekeepers. Any approach that does not include women will fail. It will absolutely fail. They are the ones that know their communities. They understand some issues. I want to share a quick little story that really surprised me. I went last July to a conference on security issues, and it was organized by women, led by women, and the participants were all women. And they were sharing a story they did an interview across various countries in North Africa and the Middle East, and they went to interview women and ask them, what is security for you? And the responses that they received from this question, which is, what is security, was very different from a male's perspective. And so for them, security is to be able to provide for their children, to be able to walk freely in the street and not to be harassed. It wasn't automatically military or security approach, which traditional security approach. So we need to think outside of the box. And we need to engage with women where they can bring uniqueness to these issues and enable us to see these different problems from a different perspective.
Absolutely. And the same thing could be said about peace building. You know, they say that peace building best happens when women are on the table, and when women are actually taking on the cause of peace building, it really, it really takes a completely different form and completely different shape and another level of success that does not happen when you have only men involved in these initiatives. So I hope that this is going to be something that's always going to be part of the program. Also at the Carter Center is the inclusion of women, and also, Houda, as community leaders and as religious leaders. I mean, I know that there are some women who also have been not just active as mothers and wives and sisters, but also as da'iyat, murshidat, as religious chaplains and religious leaders. I believe this is very important as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, you hit it in the spot. The most important, there have been the women that we've been engaging in this project. For example, we have one of the first Moroccan women who was part of this project who gave a khutbah in the mosque. I mean, women are leaders in religion, like you mentioned, and in various different sectors. The issue, though, is that we need to provide them space. We need to give them space, and we need to make a conscious decision to ensure that we engage with women. And I think this is where many of the projects lack, because sometimes it requires more work. So when, for example, I would recruit religious and community leaders to this project, the only names that I would get most of the time are male names. So if I just take those male names, then I would end up with 100% male religious community leaders. But so you have to do more work. Look at what are the challenges sometimes that women face that men do not face, and try to solve those issues so women can be included and can be part of this process. And I'm very happy to say that in our projects and workshops, 40% of the religious and community leaders that we've been engaging with are women.
40%?
40%, yes.
That is a very impressive ratio. I'd love to see that also echoed in many of the initiatives and symposiums and conferences and events, including those that talk about women. Like you said, exactly, you can have a panel that's all male, that's all men, which is like unacceptable, really.
Absolutely. I mean, we have to empower and amplify voices of our youth, of our women, and of our religious community actors. And like I mentioned, any meaningful intervention must engage women as frontline decision makers, because women are the gatekeepers of community. They have the social capital, the local knowledge, and the intimate networks.
I cannot agree more. This is definitely a very important point, and definitely I totally agree with you. We'll come back to this very important discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Life for Relief and Development is a nonprofit charity that has been providing humanitarian aid and development to people and communities regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background for over 22 years. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life rushes to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Life also has development projects that provide medical relief, water purification, educational programs, relief for orphans, and much more. Your help and support can greatly improve these efforts. All donations are tax deductible. For more information, please visit our website at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's lifeusa.org, 248-424-7493.
أسواق زمزم الواقع على 24065 أورشد ليك في مدينة فارمington هيلز ترحب بالجالية العربية والكلدانية. تنزيلات كبيرة على عموم المواد الغذائية في يوم الأربعاء من كل أسبوع. لا تنسوا فريش كاري اوت، جميع انواع المعجنات، وايضا صواني الكامبو المشكله والصمون الحار. لحوم حلال الجاليه العربيه والاسلاميه الملحمه باداره قصاب الجاليه المعروف سلوان جربوع. زوروهم على 24065 اورشد ليك في مدينه فارمington هيلز، او اتصلوا بهم على 248-476-0300. اسواق زمزم للمذاق عنوان لجميع طلباتكم، اتصلوا على 248-476-0300. اسواق زمزم للمعامله الراقية وكرم الضيافة عنوان.
بدأناه معكم وعاهدناكم على أن نستمر بمزيد من المتعة والعروض الحصرية على قناتي زي ألوان وزي أفلام. زي ألوان هي أول وأكبر قناة مسلسلات عربية هندية في أمريكا. أضخم الإنتاجات، مسلسلات حصرية، ومع زي أفلام فأنتم على موعد مع مغامرة جديدة كل يوم لاكتشاف سحر بوليوود. تابعوا حصريا قناتي زي ألوان وزي أفلام الآن في أمريكا على ديش نتورك وسلينج تي في.
قشات ميديترينيان ماركت بإدارة سهر قشات وأولاده يرحبون بالجالية العربية والكلدانية. جميع أنواع المواد الغذائية، البان طازجة، الكرزات والبهارات الطازجة. داخل الأسواق مطعم ميديترينيان شيش كباب يقدم يوميا جميع أنواع الكباب، المقبلات العربية العراقية وصواني الكامبو المميزة. تفتح الأسواق من 8 إلى 9 مساء من الاثنين وحتى السبت، ومن 8 صباحا إلى 9 مساء يوم الأحد. تقع الأسواق على 32839 نورث ويسترن هايوي في مدينة فارمington هيلز. لحوم حلال للجالية الإسلامية. لطلباتكم من المطعم كول 248-538-7855. That is 248-538-7855. قشة ميديترينيان ماركت، خدمة متميزة ومعاملة راقية.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arabs, WNZK 690 AM and WDMV 700 AM. Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis. We're talking today about countering Islamophobia and fighting radicalization, two parallel struggles. And with me this morning discussing this important topic is Dr. Houda Abadi, Associate Director of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center. We were talking about the importance of the role of women, but I think another very important group which actually deserves attention, Houda, is youth, young people, because it is no secret that these young people are oftentimes the targets of Daesh, recruitment efforts, and many of them, as you said, unfortunately, might be lured by some of the messages that such groups actually send out. So what is the importance here of paying attention to youth, and what are some of the approaches that could be successfully adopted in this regard?
Yeah, absolutely. Youth is also very important. I mean, youth in our region today are more educated, more connected, and more mobile than ever before. But however, against the backdrop of exclusion, protracted conflict, and marginalization, we really need to take a step back and honestly ask ourselves, why are some of them dreaming not of life, but dreaming of dying, dreaming of joining something that is terrible? And I want to share with you, and also to say, what are we doing to empower them? What are in our activities? How are we empowering them? And what does citizenship mean to them? And what is their sense of belonging to the nation state? And I want to share with you a quick example I had in Tunis, which, honestly highlights this issue of youth and the problem that we have, because it's a buzzword. We need to, engage with youth. I hear it all the time. We need to include women. We need to include youth. But how do we do that in an effective way to ensure that we are actually empowering youth? So I was in Tunisia in the summer, and in a gathering of youth and community leaders and religious leaders to address violent extremism in Tunis, specifically because I mentioned before that there has been a lot of Tunisians who have gone to Daesh. A young woman intervenes after a community leader announced a website that was launched for youth in Tunis. And she states, did you ask youth what they thought of the website, the colors used, the design, the content? And she looks at him and she says, with all due respect, as a young woman, I find this website very boring to me. And she says, did you even engage the youth to write on some topics? Did you ask what are the issues that they are facing? And if this is a website for youth, then consultation with youth is a must. So what I'm trying to say is that sometimes we give lip service to these issues without really engaging them from the core. So here you go, a website that was supposedly designed for youth, right, to discuss these serious issues, but there has been zero consultation with young people. And the one thing that Daesh does well is it has an excellent understanding of youth and their grievances. And many of the videos that we have seen before they lost a lot of territory were not violent videos. Were actually videos where there was a sense of belonging, identity, the camaraderie, solidarity. So we really need to look back and say, what are we doing? How are we engaging our youth in our various projects? How are we empowering them? And what are the voices? They're not only the leaders of tomorrow, we should think of them of the leaders of today.
And you said a very important point, which is actually inviting them to the table and making sure we actually listen to them and listen to what they want to see and what they want to hear, rather than assuming that this is what they want and this is what they need, which is a very important point.
Yes, absolutely.
And I was also surprised to see how really technologically savvy a group like Daesh is, to be very honest with you. I mean, their level of, using technology and using YouTube videos and even things like music and songs and nasheeds and all of that stuff. Would you like to comment a little bit on that, and how can we possibly try to produce something of better quality?
Absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned throughout, that for Daesh, the media field is as important or sometimes even more important than the actual battlefield. Now that Daesh has lost territory, we have seen what happened in Raqqa, and a lot of people are, celebrating while it is symbolically important and militarily important. Military intervention alone is insufficient, and Daesh most probably will be morphing into some kind of insurgency group where we're going to see more of these videos. Daesh is very tech savvy. It uses a lot of emotional appeals in their videos. It has, in our work, we've identified 7 main narratives that Daesh uses to recruit. And not all of them, the religious narrative, which means like if you join Daesh, you're going to be a better Muslim. Out of the 600 videos that we have coded, less than 10% were religious narratives. A lot of them were on identity, or were on social contract, were on, showing them that basically it's a form of a community. So Daesh has been able to create a lot of videos, a lot of online magazines where it circulates them also offline. And they use a lot of emotions, and they also provide offers to people who have grievances. So if you can't do this, then you can have this. And our problem is that we have focused specifically on rational appeals, which is like, terrorism is bad. There's no emotions. It's devoid of emotions. It's very, how can I say, there's no interactivity, and we're not using the online space effectively. So we need to switch that in terms of Daesh. But I also want to say something else. I want to say we need to look at also not just Daesh, but we need to look at Islamophobia. I have 2 kids. I have 2 girls. And every time they open the media, they hear, Islam is negative. I have to be careful on my choices on what they can and cannot hear on the radio, public radio, or on the television, because of how Muslims and Arabs are portrayed in the U.S. media. So we also need to engage in terms of shifting this paradigm and really reclaiming our narratives. Because young people who were born during, within the era of 9/11, I mean, they have seen almost on a daily basis, the association of Islam with something that is negative. And I can only imagine the internalization and the impact that it has on our young people.
And their self-image and how they see themselves and how they see the world around them. There is no question about it. Houda, we will definitely have you again on the show, because I did not even cover half of the issues that I wanted to talk about with you today, and I still have many more issues I wanted to talk about. But in the remaining few minutes we have of the show, I want to specifically focus on the term long-term approach. You mentioned something about this is not a short-term approach, this is a long-term approach. Can you, in the remaining couple of minutes, tell us quickly what does that really mean and why it's important?
We need a comprehensive approach to countering all forms of extremism, all forms, including the rise of white supremacy, as I mentioned. The danger right now in the United States is white supremacy groups. We need to counter Islamophobia. We need to counter Daesh and groups such as Daesh. Violent extremism has no religion, color, or race. But when I mean long-term also is we need to engage with community leaders. It's very easy to wage war. Waging war is very easy. Bombing a city to stone ages is very easy to do. But waging peace is very difficult. And waging peace requires a long-term solution. And that means that we need to think about, the social, political, and economic fabric that has been ripped apart in the Middle East. How are we going to be rebuilding it? We have many challenges, and we need a multi-pronged approach to address all of them, including responding to social, political grievances, poor governance, lack of development, long-standing conflicts such as the ones in Syria. Unless we address these, violent extremism is going to continue to flourish, and it will morph into something else. If it's not Daesh, it's something else. And we need to do the same thing. Like, how can we ensure that, our youth are proud, American Muslims, or are proud American Arabs? How can we ensure and how can we make sure that we respond to things when it's on Islamophobia, for example? How can we change this image and this portrayal of Arab and Muslims in the media as well?
And like you mentioned before, these are all interrelated and interconnected issues and interconnected struggles. We cannot separate one from the other, correct?
Absolutely. We cannot succumb to the rhetoric of hatred and fear. Really, all forms of racism are a violation of human rights and fundamental freedoms. The rise of Islamophobia that we're seeing right now is an affront to our common humanity and our constitutional principles. And when, one thing I want to end with is when fundamental human rights are protected, societies thrive. When communities are silenced systemically and excluded from the political process, basic rights are denied, all people suffer. And this is why it's a long journey ahead of us, and we really need a multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely. I cannot agree more. And I really want to thank you, Dr. Houda Abadi, for being our guest this morning with us here on US Arab Radio. We're going to have you again on the show to discuss the remaining issues we did not have time to cover today. But I also want to thank you warmly for the great work that you are doing at the Carter Center. And I wish you every success in your journey in fighting all of these evils and bringing more peace and security and love to the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks to all our listeners. And with that, we end our show this morning. Thank you all for being with us. Take care and have a great day. Goodbye.